I'm Scott Rusnak, and I'm about to have a productive conversation with Mike Vardy.
Welcome to A Productive Conversation. I'm Mike Vardy, and I'm excited to introduce today's guest, Scott Rusnak. Scott is an entrepreneur and executive coach who's been helping business owners design successful operating systems for their companies for over 15 years. He also happens to be a fellow Canadian. We dig into that a little bit before we hit record, and we allude to it during the conversation. Now, in his book, The Entrepreneur's Field Guide, Design Your Life Before Someone Else Does It For You, Scott shares the principles and tools he's developed to help people achieve balance and fulfillment in both their personal and professional lives. We had a fascinating discussion about topics like setting core values, embracing the natural rhythms of life, and using journaling for self-reflection. Scott also provided some actionable exercises that you can start applying right away. I think you'll find this to be a practical and yet inspiring conversation about designing the life you want through intentional planning. So without further ado, let's get to my conversation with Scott Rusnak. Enjoy. Scott, thanks so much for taking the time to join me today. I appreciate it. We had a bit of a Canadian kind of back and forth initially before we jumped on record, and it's always a pleasure to talk about my home and native land, eh?
Well, it's mine as well. And it's interesting. I always talk to someone from Victoria, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's funny because most people, when I talk to them and they're not Canadian like you and I, it's one of the cities in Canada where you can actually say you're from Victoria, and a lot of people still get it because of the cruise ships, because of how Bouchard Gardens and all that, all those things that we've been, because you can drive down the I-5 and you can get to California and there's signs saying visit Bouchard Gardens in Victoria, BC. I'm like, wait, this is thousands of miles or kilometers away, and yet so it's fascinating that this is one of the, because I mean, growing up in Hamilton, Ontario, you'd never say that. You'd say you're from Toronto. And I was seeing a clip the other day where it was a baseball player, and they were talking to Bert Kreischer, the comedian, and he said the pitcher Danny Graves said, "I'm from Tampa," and then Bert goes, "No, you're from Brand, like that's a different spot, like you don't." And so you wouldn't say you were from Hamilton, you'd say from Toronto, but Victoria, you can get away with it, which is kind of neat.
Well, sometimes I say Vancouver Island for the ones that look a little bit lost, but that's rare.
That's a way to get someone lost, though, because they're like, oh, Vancouver's on Vancouver Island, right? No, well, Victoria's on Victoria Island, and then it becomes a whole thing. And then you get lost. And what I love about how this conversation goes is this conversation is about a book that's going to keep you from getting lost as an entrepreneur, right? So the book that we're going to be talking about today, it's your, and again, I love the crux of your design in this book. It's just like, this is a book that it's the Entrepreneur's Field Guide. Design your life before someone else does it for you. And the way you've designed it's like, it looks like a field guide. Like the cover is like designed to be like, hey, you put this in your pocket, take it with you wherever you go. And that way you've got this manual, this guide, this almost, manifesto of sorts to help you as an entrepreneur. Now, I'm assuming that was a deliberate choice, right?
It was a somewhat deliberate choice. And for those that want to get lost, it would be a great book to get lost in as well. So why not, Mike?
Fair. So what was the gap that this book, that you saw that this book sought to, like, is kind of going to fill? Because there are a lot of, there are a lot of entrepreneurial books out there, but what was the gap that you noticed? You're like, hey, this will fill that gap.
Yeah. The last 15 years, I've been an executive coach working with leadership teams. The foundation is the Entrepreneurial Operating System. So we help people design their businesses, but nobody's helping them design their life. So the impetus was about 15 years ago. It's been an absolute blast pulling it together.
Well, and so we're talking about Traction here, right? Like the book. Well, Traction is the book by Gino Wickman, right? And EOS is kind of part. Like I'd say that's where I got introduced to it, right? For someone who doesn't know what that is, and I know just touch on it briefly, because I think integrating that or integrating elements of that into one's life can be valuable, but people don't generally see that.
They don't. And with EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, and the book Traction, we say there's three simple things you're going to get. You're going to get straight on your vision. You're going to know where you're going. Hey, then you're going to run with discipline and accountability. We call that traction. But the most important part, and probably the hardest part, Mike, is to be able to run your business in a healthy, open, honest way. So if you pull all those three things together, vision, traction, healthy, you'll be headed in the right direction with your business. Well, then why can't we do that in our life as well? So that's kind of the glue for me.
Right out of the gate, the first thing you talk about is finding focus. And there's
Yeah.
this quote I love that I throw out there, Thomas Merton, clarity affords focus, right? And, one of the things that I find it's hard to do. I'm not saying that we don't take time to do it because we try. Is in a world that's moving so quickly, and especially when we hear about work-life balance, which again can be a misnomer. Getting that moment to find clarity, or getting those moments to find clarity, can be really tricky. But you address a lot of the stuff, especially when it comes to this idea of, I like the idea of the moral compass and values. Why? Why do you feel that we don't give those areas of our life the attention that they deserve? And how is it, when you say don't overthink it, how, I think that's part of the problem. Can we address that?
Let's go right there. When I work with business owners, I always ask them what their values are, and they'll come up with some words, integrity, and I laugh. Well, that was on the wall at Enron as well. So let's really, right, let's really talk about your values. And you go through this process with them, and you end up with things like do the right thing, help first, be humbly confident. And when people come up with these really great values, and those are three of mine, they come up with these values, you make sure they walk the talk with those values in mind. So my moral compass says, hey, I'm going to do the right thing every day. I'm going to be as humble as humanly possible. And I'm going to make sure that I help first. So no matter who it is, whatever the situation is, that's going to allow me to make tricky decisions and sometimes really easy ones. So it becomes a big deal for me.
Now, you talk about this idea, and you mentioned this even as we were getting ready to have the conversation, this idea of being the architect of your life. It, when people hear that, or at least when I do, um, architecture has there's a precision amount, right? Like there's precision involved with architecture. Do you think that when you use that phrase, how do you get people to not feel that when things don't go as planned, that the building slash life, whatever they're building, will fall apart? Because I think we have this Pressfield calls it the resistance. There's lots of different ways that we can address it. But this idea that, we put processes in place. We try to design or architect our life in a way that's going to help us and also allow us not to forsake the work part or the life part. We're trying to, have this, for lack of a better term, balance, this harmony. And when the slip ups occur, when things don't quite go the way they want, either because we're trying to control something that can't be controlled, or we fail to see that we have control over something and we let it slip by, how do you make sure that you don't kind of let the whole thing fall apart in those moments? Because there's a chance that can happen, and then people give up, and then they go back to the way things used to be, et cetera, et cetera.
Most people give up. I know you don't. I don't. So there's a certain amount of grit. Angela Duckworth, thank you for really making grit a big deal. But not everyone should get a trophy like the Little League or the little soccer thing. Every kid gets a trophy for losing. That's not reality, and that's not real life. So we've got to have the foundation in place. I'll go back to those values. But then we want to make sure we're standing on the shoulders of giants. Because if you surround yourself with the right family members, friends, and professional associates, you got one heck of a shot at getting everything you want.
When it comes to the idea of values, which you've talked about, and then we get into part two where we're starting to talk about MAP. Now, MAP, it's an acronym, right? And I love me a good acronym. Can we talk through that? Because again, we have this compass, which I'm imagining is like, this is where I want to go. And then the map helps you get there. Can we dive into that a bit? Because I think everybody would love to have a map, right?
Yeah. So the whole idea of a map came to me about 40 years ago when I was trying to become this professional cyclist in Western Canada. let's say I did okay, but I never made the Tour de France. But my coach was the national team coach. His name was Des Dickey. He said, "Look, Rusnak, you're talented, but you're not as talented as Steve Bauer. So how do we enter you in the races so you can be successful?" And he called it my accountability plan. And Des, I love you to this day. I stole it and turned it into the map. And reality is I do a lot of R&D, rip off, duplicate,
Steal,
make the
steal
idea.
like an artist, as Austin Kleon says, right?
So what I did is I took this thing and turned it into about 10 questions. It's on 2 simple pages. First is, what are your values? Okay. Then who do you surround yourself with? There's this thing called Dunbar's number that I believe deeply in, which we can talk about a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But then what are your passions? What do you want from your life? I don't like the word bucket list. What are your passions? What's your lifetime wish list? And are you telling the people that are most important to you about these things? My wife, my kids, my best friends know exactly what I want to be doing the next quarter, the next year. And when I turn 60, I'll be riding my bike to base camp in Everest because of this, my accountability plan. So it's a big deal for me.
Let's talk about Dunbar's number, because most people associate it with the amount of people they associate with. Like, you can only have a certain amount, but I think it can go much deeper than that, right?
It can. So Robin Dunbar is a pretty amazing physiologist from Liverpool University. Now, we won't get into the Premier League right now in Liverpool, but we'll just focus on the
I'm a
fact
Leicester
that
City fan, so I'm happy that they're just getting promoted back again. And why am I a Leicester City fan? Really quickly, Jamie Vardy. How could I not be a fan of my namesake? Anyway, go ahead.
I was going to say, Journalist Dunbar broke down this concept called 5-15-150. He said there's typically about 5 people in your life that you talk to every day. They know your values. They might know you better than yourself. And those people have the ability to poke you in the nose, but you can also call them at 2 a.m. They'll come to your rescue. So when I look at my 5, it's my wife, my 2 boys, my mother, and then my mentor. Those 5 people are the most important people in my life, and they help me. Now, it could be 6 or 7, but as a rule for me, 5 works. And then he said there's about 15 other people that you see every 30, 60, 90 days. They might be old college roommates, sports buddies or partners, business associates, but you trust them with your left leg. We were talking earlier about Scott Martin, who's a partner in the Fernwood Inn. Love that guy. He's in my 15. I see him once a year. But those are the people who've got your back. So when you look at your 5 and your 15, you can design your life around those folks, knowing there's probably a bigger circle that are out there that support you as well. And he called that 150. And his arithmetic, his design, his studies went back to ancient times and said when villages got bigger than 150 people, there was crime, incest, bad things were happening. So groups that are smaller than 150 seem to be stable. For me, I turn it on its head. I've got 5, 18, and 42 because I'm actually not that social. So it just feels good to me. And if somebody wants to come in, I'm going to need to break up with someone, and I'd prefer not to do that.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that I've noticed over the years, and it changes too, right? Like, it definitely evolves, is there are certain people that are in my life that fit in a certain season of my life, and they don't fit in any longer. But I wonder if, and this is where I think the nuance can show up and get a bit tricky. There are certain people that don't fit into the certain aspect of my life, but they fit into another. So I know some people get really hesitant about, as they grow, of letting go of a relationship because it doesn't necessarily serve them in one area, but it still fills their cup in another. So the distinction there, what were there examples of that you faced, number one, but also when someone's facing that distinction, or at least faced with that choice, what are some of the things that they can do to kind of make sure that they, don't necessarily make a snap decision on this sort of thing? Because it's not as, it's not just, it's either this or that. There is some nuance there, right?
There absolutely is. In a business setting or in a personal setting, I use a tool called the People Analyzer. And I've got my core values, and I find out who someone is. Are they humble? Do they do the right thing? Do they do what they say? This appears to be that kind of person. Do I get them and do they get me? Okay. Do I want to be with them? Do I want to hang out with them? Do they want to hang out with me? And then last, which might also be the most important, do they have the capacity, the mental, the emotional, the physical, the educational, the time, and maybe the sense of humor capacity to say, yeah, I want to hang around with this Rusnak guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I flip it on its head. Do I want to hang out with these other people as well? It makes it really easy for the clients that I coach, but it can make it really difficult for family members and maybe some friends that don't fit that mold anymore. But the tool gives me the ability to pat someone on the back and say, hey, why don't we grab a beer? Here's what's going on. I'll see you again in a while.
Yeah. Go to the Fernwood Inn, which now I want to do after this because they have a great chicken sandwich there. But nonetheless, speaking of seasons, you talk about this idea of the rhythm of life, and it's something that I don't think we look at enough when it comes to work and life. I'm turning 50 this year. By a month from when this episode actually airs, I will be 50. So it'll be just about 4 weeks away. And it's interesting because I'm noticing things have changed over the last, actually, I saw a colleague of mine online post at 45. They're like, I'm starting to get this don't GAF stuff going on in my life, right? Like that moment of, it's not apathy, but it's like, you're not couching your responses nearly as much as you used to. You're being a bit more selective, and you're okay with being selective. And I'm finding that, but it's interesting that all goes with this idea of the rhythm of life. And one of the quotes that you have in the book, when you were talking about surfing, is the idea of, the when you're looking at your energy, it's the tide that exists within your life. And, tides, they come in. I live in Victoria, you're familiar with Victoria, like the tides are part of what we see like every single day. For somebody who's struggling with this idea of life not being a straight progressive line up, or what are some of the things they can do in terms of execution that will allow them to honor that rhythm?
Yeah, I love it. I also talk about a design phase. So if you look at your calendar for the next 12 months, get into a design phase to realize that every 90 days, the seasons do change.
Mm-hmm.
But in that 90-day period, you've got to take, for me, at least 2 weeks where I'm going to do nothing. I'm going to disappear. I'm going to have a vacation. I'm going to recharge, which I'll give you credit for one of your earlier podcasts. You talk about a gap day before vacation and after. Dang good idea. And if you invented it, you should trademark that yesterday, Mike. But you've got to give yourself the grace of doing nothing. You've got to take your foot off the gas, because when you get back from that vacation or that time, you might have some murky waters. And the waters in Victoria and San Diego this weekend was not good.
Mm-hmm.
But there'll be a blue sky day and the tide will be perfect. And when that happens, I'm going to take advantage of that, not only in business, but in life. So when you're ready and you're rested, when the right opportunity pops up, you take hold.
One of the things that, so you talk about this idea of start, stop, continue. This ties in nicely to all of this stuff, because what I love about the way you've constructed this book is that it's done in such a way that there are actionable things that you can take away. So there's definitely stories and anecdotes and philosophical underpinnings, because you've spent some time in this field, this stuff, but people, are looking for actionable, things that they can do because it helps them, kind of get those quick wins. When you're talking about things like the start, stop, continue list, the implementation intention, like those kind of things, do you want to caution people that they're not quick wins? Because I've looked at this, like when I was going through the book, I'm like, these aren't, there's no hacks around this stuff, right?
Absolutely. Give yourself 4 to 8 years. A lot of people contact, hey, Scott, I want to build a coaching practice. Okay, well, what's your history and where are you going? Because it might take you 10.
Right.
So when I go to start, stop, continue, I look at those as negotiables and non-negotiables in my life. The non-negotiables that I'm not going to do anymore, that I'm going to stop, is, Hey, I'm not going to the Fernwood Inn for 2 drinks the night before a full day client session. That's an easy stop.
Hmm.
But everyone took a look at those little 1, 2, 3% things that said, hey, I want to have a good night's sleep. I'm not going to have the dessert tonight. I'm going to take the dog for a walk. I'm going to shut myself down at the right level so that I can recharge overnight. So that start, stop, continue list has got to be filled with non-negotiables and then the stuff you've got to do to knock it out of the park that day.
Well, and I think what's interesting about that is it kind of flies in the face of this idea that we live for today because tomorrow isn't guaranteed. That advice needs to be really couched because, or at least like looked at more deeply, because when you hear those kind of phrases, and I'm not again, I mean, we clearly want to live for the moment and things like that, but if we try to cram too much in, or we're doing like again, we're not listening to ourselves, then and our energy and the like, those are things that are very qualitative that we can miss. So you talk about, and this is where like I gotta say, Scott, when I was looking at the book, as soon as I see journaling, because Ryan Holiday talks about journaling in his books too, and he's very much a like memento mori, remember that you will die, like
Yeah.
stoic kind of stuff. And when I saw him talk about journaling and stillness is the key, I'm seeing an opening up of this where it's becoming more not only accepted but prevalent in this space in business in life where getting back to that idea of reflection is key. So when you how was your journaling journey? Because I know a lot of listeners here. I mean, I know people in my community, they're like, "Oh, I don't know what to journal about. Or, oh my good, like, what's the point? You know, I can see my calendar. It'll tell me what I did, like all those things. So I would love for you to touch on this because I think this kind of ties in a lot of the other stuff that's in your book. Like that act of journaling has such it's an undervalued and underutilized tool.
Well, I always say putting down the ink will make you think. I know it sounds a little corny,
Uh-huh.
but if you could wake up in the morning, that journal's close to bed, I hope it is, instead of turning on the news and everything else that goes on, sit there for 5, 10 minutes and write down who the people are that have helped you get to be where you are. So a little bit of gratitude, 4 or 5 minutes in the morning. And when you do that and you can look through that, you realize, dang, I'm in a pretty good spot. And then write down an intention of what you're going to do if you come up with a bump in the road that day. Hey, I'm going to use my core values to make that tricky decision. If it doesn't go my way, which it probably won't, think about it. About a third of the time, if you get lucky, you'll win. Well, this is the direction I'm going to head. But when it doesn't, go back to that journal, realize that you got here for some reason, and there's people in your corner that will help you.
Keeping score, measurements. I think about this a lot too because the tricky part, I definitely I would love to hear your thoughts on this from a qualitative standpoint, because quantitative measurements is where we've gone and gone and like to the point where there's an imbalance when it comes to being productive or productivity, which I don't even like. The productivity has now become this thing where it's not about doing right, it's about doing lots. And the more you
Yeah.
do, the more productive you are. But if you are doing the wrong things, is that truly productive? What about I mean, I can tell you right now, art cannot be measured. Like you can be a prolific artist, but if you make a bunch of crap, then is it truly productive? So when it comes to keeping score, and one of my favorite books about, and again, you allude to sport a lot in your book, and you've talked about a lot, like in your life, you've got a lot of, one of my favorite books is Bill Walsh's The Score Takes Care of Itself, right? Where culture gets built. And as much as it pains me to say this, I've said it before, as a Bengals fan, I don't like having a 49ers coach who we had as a Bengals coach, write one of the best, books in this field on that subject matter. But when it comes to keeping score, how do you recommend and how do you make sure that it's not just quantitative, but there's qualitative elements so that you're not forsaking one for the other and you have a bit more balance?
Love it. So we'll go back to another hockey guy, that Wayne Gretzky guy who said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So you got to keep score of the most important elements. How much time do you have every day for deep, deep work? well, I'd say maybe 3 or 4 iterations of maybe 30 to 45 minutes. That's it. You can't go full bore all day. Then when you go back and keep score, I want you to go to that journal at the end of the day and say, how many meetings did I attend today? How many calls was I on that had little to no value? And you've got to start to remove those, and you should write them down. And at the end of the day, if you could have a 0 for meetings that were terrible and I shouldn't have attended, hooray, you won. Then you could flip it on its head and say, I want to have 3 or 4 impactful, intense, productive meetings. Go for it. But keep those as small iterations. You can't do it all day long.
So as we get close to wrapping up, Scott, one of the things that you comes up in the book again and again is putting it all together, taking these things and putting them all together. Is this book, if someone picks up this book, is it to me, it felt like it could be a cover to cover read, but it also feels like you need to go back and, I need to amplify this. I need to elevate this. I need to revisit this. So there's elements to it that I think if you read it from cover to cover, that's the framework that you should be looking at, because again, foundational and so on and so forth when you're being the architect of your life, but also fine tuning comes along. So if someone picks up this book, or when someone picks up this book, as you constructed it and as you've kind of put things together with it, how should someone absorb this book?
Yeah. So a lot of people have read it. And Scott, I've got this dialed in about 70 minutes, so a little over an hour. Got it all right in front of them. I then tell them to go to the important chapters, the start, stop, continue, your core values, go to that people analyzer, go to Dunbar's number, and reevaluate every week, maybe for a month or 2, and really get deep on those things. Most people don't want to do the easy stuff. This book is full of simple, easy tools that'll get you. But if you don't put the reps in, you're going to be in the same place you were last year. And the only person's fault it is your own.
Yeah, right out of the gate, you say most everyone will be in the same place this time next year. Let's make sure it isn't you. So definitely pick up the book. It is out now. The book is called The Entrepreneur's Field Guide: Design Your Life Before Someone Else Does It For You. Scott, where can people pick up the book, and where can they learn more about you and the work you're doing?
They go to my website, scottrusnak.com, or shoot me an email. I'll get you the link to the book. And we talk about obstacles as we started before we started the show. Well, Amazon's site got hacked. That's okay. We're starting up a new Squarespace site soon, so it'll be available online real soon.
Excellent. Scott, thanks so much for taking the time today to have a productive conversation with me.
Thanks, Mike. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks to Scott for joining me on the program, and thanks to you for listening. Really appreciate it. You can find all of the related show notes and links and everything that you're looking for at productivityist.com/podcast530. Of course, you can also check out those links and read the show notes wherever you are getting your podcast, be it YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. Where you are getting your podcast also is the place where you can subscribe to this podcast. That way you can search through the archives really quickly and easily and grab episodes that you want to listen to, but also make sure that you don't miss a single episode that's coming up. It's one way to support the show. Another way to support the show is to check out the sponsors that you heard mentioned during our conversation today. You can find them at productivityist.com/podcast sponsors. Click on the links there, and that way they know that we sent you. That's it for this episode. I'll be back next time with another episode. This will be in the PM Talk series with my good friend Patrick Rohn, so I'm looking forward to delivering that to you next time. Until then, I'm Mike Vardy, the host of A Productive Conversation, reminding you to stop doing productive and start being productive. See you later.